You are listening to When Veins Meet Like Rivers. Katinniq, okizata, maadawaan. The podcast expanding on the meaning and behind-the-scenes creation of the exhibit by the same name, hosted by the Plug In ICA. It's a podcast about survival, desire, and kinship. It's about the places where we crash and flow into each other. It's about how and what we resist and submit to. I hope that you enjoy our offerings.
I was about 3 years old, 2 or 3 years old. My brother Alec, we used to have a bridge not far. There was a river not far from our place, and we'd go over there and they'd fish, over there was a bridge, and over the bridge, like the part here on the bridge, and Alec sat me there and pretend he's gonna throw me in the river. He just to scare me. And he dropped me. I fell right in the river. In April, there was still ice on the river, and I went, and the river was flowing, and I went little ways, and Alec jumped in after me, rescued me. Otherwise, I would have drowned.
You were 2 or 3?
Because I remember sitting by an oven.
Yeah.
My mother took the oven high, opened it, and I sat there with that part I remember. I don't remember falling or being in the water.
But you remember being warm.
Yeah, to be warm, yes.
Yeah.
Because there was icy water.
This is a conversation I had with my kin and spiritual crush, Ashley Houston.
Do you want to introduce yourself?
Buju anin nidinawe magneduk wapshke mekanak misko ananga kwe makwa nindodem sagi nindoji. So my English name is Ashley. The spirit names I was given was White Turtle, Red Star Woman, and I'm from Sagi.
Awesome. Thanks so much for sitting with me today to talk about this. I just wanted to start off with just a little bit of a warm up, but just to say we've just been doing this through our podcast where we kind of like to talk about how we met each other, because a lot of the show, the phrase "when veins meet like rivers" is really just talking about how confluences meet, how rivers meet, different streams that connect together. And since it's a show where there is 3 people in it, we all have these kind of links and ties to each other, and it's been really great to be able to share the kind of the origin stories and how we came to be, our own little creation stories that we kind of touch on. But I don't know, I just remember because we were kind of talking about this the other day where we met at Turtle Lodge in Cielen. So I was walking into your territory essentially.
Yeah, a little bit. I was still a little bit new there when I first went to Sundance there. So, I had a couple friends, but you were one of the first connections I actually made at Sundance. So,
it's same.
Yeah.
I don't know. I was saying before, when you go to community events and you're just kind of sussing each other out, and we're who's this? Who are you related to? Where are you from? We don't know each other yet. Everyone's not really standoffish, but we're all sussing each other out.
Yeah.
Especially in that space, because we're about to be pretty damn vulnerable with each other for the next couple of days, right?
Yeah.
And I just remember, you had just such a welcoming, calm energy that I was immediately drawn to right away. I was this person, I want to get to know this person.
Mm-hmm.
And then for reasons, you couldn't continue.
Yeah.
And I was fuck, okay, damn, that's the coolest person that I could see talking to, and they're not even going to be here. But then you stuck around, literally, you'd be at the fire and everything. You'd come and support, I could see you in my peripheries like I could see you supporting, like coming to support the other dancers that were there. Like you still, you still very much stayed with us in that group. And so it didn't even really feel like you had left.
Yeah, definitely. Like when I came out, it still felt like I was a dancer, and I was very much a part of the ceremony. And I really missed being like in the arbor. And
I know.
yeah, just kept sneaking in there.
Yeah, you kept sneaking in.
Yeah.
But then also like the sacred fire, I think was really cool, because sacred fires are like the kind of place where the ones that have a hard time sleeping, or we're not really supposed to socialize and do all that, especially like they don't want us at the sacred fire because we'll be hanging out with all the Oshkobeowis, and
Yeah.
if we're women, we should be hanging out with them or whatever, because I was like, well, yeah, of course, everyone gets to know each other, and what better than around a fire. But I think that's like, yeah, because you would hang out there, and so I would come there obviously because I just come for the gab. I come to listen to the people, and you were like singing the turtle. Like I think I can't remember how it worked out, but you were singing it, and I said that like that's a song I like wanted to learn, and somehow through that exchange, you taught me the turtle song.
Yeah.
And it was over like multiple nights too. It wasn't just like, well, I think it was like one night specifically. But then I feel like we did it like more like later on, other nights too.
Yeah, throughout the 4 days, and even after, because I think we hung out for like 2 or 3 days after
We did.
the ceremony there.
Yeah. And I couldn't get the words, and I really wanted to.
Yeah. Parmesan, but with the B.
Parmesan but with the B.
Yeah.
Oh my God, when I sent you that, I was so nervous when I sent you that recording. All you say was like, it's Parmesan with a B, Dayna. I was like, fuck.
No, it sounded good. That's what came to mind right away.
Right away. I was like, oh, this is what you have to say. But I like that. I like that tease, because we're all like real sensitive about our voices.
Oh, yeah.
And how did that feel to be on a big drum like that, in that way?
So at first I was kind of scared of the big drum. Just with the teachings I grew up, they're very strict on women not sitting at the big drum, and so that really like scared me away from sitting there. But I just kept feeling like I was being pulled to that big drum. Like the opportunity kept coming up, and it really like meeting you and like getting to know you really opened my eyes on different views and different teachings, and more so of like accepting to do what feels right within myself. And sitting at that big drum feels right within like a time and a place. Like like I wouldn't go to Turtle Lodge and sit at their big drum, but like in community, I feel good at the big drum. Like I feel confident. I feel that healing that comes from the singers, and it's an amazing feeling to sit, and it's a different feeling than being on the outside of the drum. Like you can almost feel that like protection from that drum, and like creating that circle around that singers, and then everyone else around the drum is receiving that healing. And it's almost like time like stops when you're at the big drum, and like other than like your throat getting sore, that's like the only physical like barrier with the big drum, I find.
I so feel that too.
Yeah.
Because it's like it's almost like it disappears. Like there's just nothing else in that moment really is important, in the sense that you're just like there and you're present. And it's just like joy, like it's just joy actually. Like even when I'm singing like a grieving song, like trying those things, I know how to hold, like I'm just learning how to hold those songs, and like what that means to feel like with those different songs of like what emotions are coming up.
Yeah.
When you're sounding out that heartbeat, and when you're drumming in unison, and all the different teachings that just come along with that care, like that being, I guess that was like such a huge intention of mine, because I've been drumming with my mom on a big drum for long, over 10 years easily. But I'm like, what do I actually know about this being? You know? And I felt like I was really, like, I had a good connection with the drum. I felt confident in that, you know, but I always felt like maybe this wasn't, like, when is going to be that right time where I step into that role of carrying my own, because I could see it. But it's always being afraid of that too. Like, you're always kind of afraid of, do you ever feel like that you're like afraid of your gifts? Like,
oh yeah. Yeah. Like with my pipe, even, like I had that for a while, and it took me a while to actually accept it and use that pipe. And I think like a lot of that comes just from like being like so taught in, like, I don't know, the white community. I don't know how to say that better, that like we're not good enough. And it's even like affected like our elders, like that intergenerational trauma where they, like, you have to like almost prove yourself worthy before you step into these gifts. But I also believe like gifts like that, they have to be like very, like, you can't just go out and like buy it. Like it has to come in some type of like spiritual way, whether it's like a dream and then you go out and pursue that, but by purchasing it, or but yeah, with like drums and like ceremonial items, there has to be that's foundation of spirit behind it.
It's like very clear intention.
Yeah.
You know, I'm always wondering with those teachings if it's from this deep sacred place, but I'm also realizing that it's like, it does sometimes just come from us, so we don't even know it. Sometimes we're adding to these stories and we don't even realize it. But it's true. It's like you always feel like you're missing something if you don't have the protocols of how to care. You know, the protocols, like, what are the protocols behind the songs? What are the protocols when you come to the drum? What are the protocols of activating that, of feeding that spirit? What are the protocols of protecting that spirit? And knowing it more than just a drum, that it is like when we had those teachers that came to do, that was something that was like really important for me, because I don't know, I just really wanted to do a drumming circle. Like, it always felt like art galleries are not necessarily the spaces where I see this happening. And I'm like, I wonder what that means to inhabit this space. Is like kind of sometimes institutionalized, is like not, it's not like it's a place where we are, like, our ancestors, our people come to. Often it's not really a place that they feel like they belong in, let alone in a university building. You know, there's like those clear blockages that are there. And so
like, in a way, you're like kind of like bridging that gap, and then like making them see that there needs to be a space for like ceremonial or drum groups or two-spirited powwows and stuff like that.
And just a place for two-spirit people to gather, for women to gather safely, for us to have these conversations, because it wasn't a spectacle, it was an event, it was a very close thing where it was like I really thought about who do I have kinship with, who do I have trust and respect with, and who feels comfortable enough to come as well, into that circle, because a lot of these spaces are never advertised to us. And so it's like we have to do all this guesswork, this detective work to what's that word? The thought just escaped me in that moment, but it's just like you're trying to find cultivate. Is it cultivate? The ways in which we cultivate that. And even my trepidation with wanting to reach out to those women drummers, I'm like, what are they going to think? Like, I always felt like I'm not worthy enough, I'm not, when am I going to be ready? When is going to be a good time? And it's interesting how art can facilitate that, because like I live in a place now where I don't have those direct teachings, and it's so crazy. You come back here and it's like that, when you it's like when you're asking for those medicines and you're like, you don't see them but then you really start to like really look for them and they just start appearing to you and you're just like, I just looked in that ditch. Like,
Yeah.
mhm. But also for me, it was really important to reach out to this particular drum group because of what we witnessed with the Saw One stories, the sisters, their stories of how they've been doing this for a decade. And like that perseverance, I really resonate with that as like a two-spirit person.
Yeah.
Of like just taking a lot of opinions and shit from other people.
Yeah, it was really like interesting to see like how they taught us something, like the ladies at the big drum, and then we also were able to like share a bit of our teachings of Two Spirited. And yeah, I thought it was really amazing because their son is Two Spirited, and I've got to know them through the community. And
yeah. And I think it's like through their son and seeing them at the powwow, the two-spirit powwow, that it felt right. And then my mom knows like one of the sisters through community, and they just had such a good, because they sometimes they look real tough. I love, they look real tough. I'm like, those are niches that I wouldn't want to mess with. She got a big old beautiful neck tattoo, and I'm like, that's hardcore. And she's so traditional singing. I'm like, wow, that's like the best. You had such yin and yang. But it's through their kid, that the fact that it's very clear that their kid is Two Spirit. And I'm like, that already is like the buffer. It's not like they're coming totally fresh to us. And the fact that they were just like so willing to want to be with us. Was really, it was really, really beautiful.
I was wondering about how that ties into did you get to see Dayna's work in the exhibition?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you were there for the performance.
Yeah, so I was curious. Before, what I was curious about was because I can see like a link to the drumming to the what we were calling like ceremony, not ceremony performance.
Yeah.
That Dayna did. So I was curious about if you had any thoughts about that.
Yeah.
If you want to share.
You're like, yeah, I see it.
Even if it's not all complimentary, you can share.
Also, yeah. You can razz me. I give you permission. That's the ongoing consent.
Well, at first, like seeing the antlers and like the performance, I was like, oh, this is kind of pushing it. But it really made me like think in a different way. And it kind of just like made me think of like our friendship, because we're so different, but we're so like alike in the same way. But even like just down to the teachings, like, or the like our views in life, they're very different. And it like made me think of like how like that river meets. And when I was like getting ready and thinking about like what I was going to say, I kept thinking of that water song, like the like Wichita do, like when it goes fast and slow. And it really made me think of like even the music that was like tied into the performance, and how that music, like it took me to like the water right away. Like just like closing my eyes, I could feel the water and the life of the water, and it was really healing to hear that. And it felt like it like opened my mind and my spirit to viewing things in a different way, because like we all walk different paths and we all go down like a different river, but eventually like that river meets and we're all like connected, and we're all connected through that veins. And like, because all those veins, they lead to the heart, and that's what we all are. We're all like people of the heart. So yeah, that performance like really spoke to my spirit, and so much so that like that night that I went home and I had a dream of a two-spirited pipe that needs to come to light. And the stem was very much like the rivers, how they intertwine, but they don't really meet until you get like right into that stem, where the stem meets the bowl of the pipe, and then that pipe represents the heart. And it just all made sense, like, to me, because like being able to help like go get those antlers, and like that, the big antler, I had it in my family's boat for a long time, and I got it in the garbage and I don't even know why I grabbed it. My family was like, what does it matter with you? And I was like, I don't know, I'm gonna paint it one day. And I just never got around to it. And then my grandpa would always call me, he's like, I'm gonna throw it out, and I'm like, no, don't do it, don't touch it, it's mine. And then yeah, when you called, I was like, oh, okay, it makes sense. It makes sense why I've been holding on to that, because like I work with a lot of like cat hide tannings and skulls and stuff like that, but I never really hold on to them. I've always just passed them on and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's really amazing to just see you do that work, because when I got to know you, I didn't even know you were interested in that at all. And then to see you get interested in that, I was like, yo, we actually have so much that lines up. And it makes me, that's like part of it, right? The blue rope is like a reference to the ceremony. It was a reference for me to a very specific thing that happened to me. Like I've told you before the story of how I was gifted my pipe and how I was very resentful of like essentially having the kind of blue pulling kind of ropes, like when you pierce and you pull the skulls, those ropes, the chief was kind of holding it in his lap, and he told me to come up, and he gave me the teaching of why women don't pull like the skulls in his arbor, and why they never will.
Mm-hmm.
And then he passed me his pipe, my pipe after that. And I just felt like so gross. Like I felt so unseen. So like, I don't know. I understood that he was trying to teach me a lesson based off of his teachings, but it actually erased me so much that it's really hard for me to connect with that pipe sometimes, because it came to me in such a weird, dehumanizing way, because first of all, I don't even identify that way, and not that he needs to know that or anything, but I was just like, I didn't understand it. Also, I didn't understand the teachings. And that was when I had that aha moment when I was like, this is not my elder.
Mm-hmm.
Like literally what the sisters talk about, like take what you need and leave the rest.
Yeah.
I had to leave that. And like, I think part of this for me was like being able to reference that, honor it in the most respectful way I could, being half in a bodysuit of camo that was see-through. So everything's out there. But then, inviting, I don't know where I'd be without kin in my process, because I asked you to help me with the antlers, and I asked a Sinayak to tie me to those antlers, and I wanted to drag it in that space. And then I just feel the connection so strongly to those blue ropes, because it's like the typical trademark of what you see in hide tanning usually is that color. Like right away, they all think about that.
Yeah.
It's not usually black or any of the other colors. It's very specifically this blue. And I was thinking of like how interesting that crossover was for that blue in a very sacred, spiritual, ceremonial place that we don't really make art from. And I don't necessarily want to make art about that. But for me, I had to make art about that experience, because I really wanted to let that go. And I think I really just like pulled for myself.
Yeah.
Because I know that it's okay in other places, because Jamie, the curator of the Winnipeg Art Gallery, Jamie Isaac, her mother, Dr. Mary Crishane, like has pulled skulls before at like there's grandmother son dances where they do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, wow, like, okay, this is, for me, it's like, it feels very objective, like what spirits are coming through. But then I was like, you know what? It's just like different stroke for different folks.
Yeah.
It's like, that's why these practices of consent are so important, and communication that we talked about, because if I had only got to know them and maybe, before I invested, maybe I would have known that this is not the place to make that investment, because when you're investing in your spirituality, your spiritualism, you know, it's in for the long haul. And these are going to be people that are going to affect you, that are going to lift you up around that. So it felt good to kind of like then tie that up at the end too. And also because like your moose, oh my God, that moose on the, I thought it was so graceful. I was just like dropping it down. All of a sudden I get like a freaking like antler in the ass, like just rips through. Just got probed. I was like, thanks, Ashley. Yeah, get you Mcleod ancestors humble me in this moment. I was like penetrate an antler. Yeah, I think it was pretty on point. There was the very seriousness and the gifting, you know, the witnessing of gifting your belongings and the things that we make, and then gonna go finish it up and then, you know, get probed in the ass. So cool. By an antler. Dope. Dope. Yeah. Do you have any last thoughts or feelings or sharings that you want to offer? Maybe even that experience of bringing your youth there to this space. And
You brought your youth to the art gallery?
Yeah. So they're just newly identifying as two-spirited, and that's because they've grown up in the foster care system and never really had access to community. Basically, they grew up in a Filipino household which was very Christian and very not cultural friendly. So that was that individual's very first two-spirited event, and just taking them to that and seeing them just like, I don't even know the word.
would you say that they like, would it be like opening up, or like kind of like you could see that kind of like vision expanding, or like an openness to be like, oh, this is what's out there.
So it was like a change in them, bringing them to the art gallery and to the show, and just I feel like they got a lot more of it than I did. Just watching their experience, they were just so amazed, and I really got a lot from it too. It really sparked something in me spiritually, I find. So for that, my youth, that individual, they really wanted to explore their identity of being two-spirited after that, and they really felt like it was okay to be themselves after that. And it also really brought us together, because it is a professional relationship, and that was a time where we could just bond and be two humans and just experience this gift together, and it was a humbling experience, and it really like changed the way I think about things today, and more of an open mind, because I'm always reminding myself that everything doesn't have to be like super strict ceremonial teachings all the time, and we are only human, and there needs to be that space for both of that, and that's like creating that space to feel like okay about being like a ceremonial person, but still having those human desires. And just realizing like everyone's only human at the end of the day.
And Oh, get you Mcleod, Ashley, for sharing tonight. That was really special. Yeah. I got him on tape. Just kidding.
Asemani Thomas, Asemami Thomas, Asema, Asema, Gitemanetu. Asemani Thomas, Asemami Thomas, Asema, Asema, Gitemanetu. Asemani Thomas, Asemami Thomas, Asema, Asema, Ninabama Jesuin. Asemani Thomas, Asemami Thomas, Asema, Asema, Ninabama Jesuin. Asemani Thomas, Asemami Thomas, Asema, Asema, Gitemanetu.
Every time we sit together, it's always just like it's a gaggle, it's gossip, it's tea, it's medicine.
It's true.
There's so much that flows between us.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, I would. So my name is Brielle Beardy-Linklater. I come from the Nisijawai Cree Nation as well as the York Factory First Nation. I was born and raised in Northern Manitoba, and I am living here in Treaty 1. And so excited to join you, Dayna.
So excited for you to join me, Brielle. You know what? It's so funny because at the beginning of every episode, we're always asking how we're kind of connected. So that's why I kept bugging you about, like, when did we first meet? When did we first meet? You know? And do you want to say from your perspective what you remember of how we first met?
Well, definitely. I remember having exposure to your art. And I do think at the time that I was just becoming aware of you, you had the Insurgents display at the WAG. I forgot. Is it Insurgents Resurgence?
Yeah, Insurgents Resurgence. Yeah.
So that's kind of like, I moved here to Winnipeg. And then obviously when you walk by the way, you see the big letters and I'm like, ooh. And then I remembered, I was like, I think I follow them on social media. And then it didn't take long before I was actually in a circle with you, like with grandfathers, with like two spirit elders in ceremony. So like my first recollection of being in your sphere is through the Sweat Lodge in St. Norbert.
Oh my goodness. It was wild because I was really trying to figure it out because we had remembered Sandy Soto when we did a two-spirit thing there. And I knew that we talked about like BDSM and like being a femme top and all of that good stuff.
Yes.
And I remember it clicked like when you had said that weird, those grounds, the grounds outside of St. Norbert Monastery. It's like the St. Norbert's Cultural Arts Center. At the back there, they have spiritual grounds. So there's two sweat lodges, one my mom runs and another guy runs there. Yeah,
that was like probably one of the first two spirit ceremonies that I even went to, not just like meeting you, but also like significantly being like one of the first two spirit led ceremonies that I've ever participated in.
Same. It was my first as well. I had never been in a sweat lodge with so many two spirit people where we just mixed it all up, you know. And we even had people in there that were indigenous to other countries. Like there was I forget what language it was, because if, I don't want to homogenize the scene in an African language, but I can't remember where it was from, but there was somebody speaking in their native tongue. And then there was
I
Arabic
remember
that was
who.
remember?
I do.
Yeah.
Because it was the BIPOC circle that was it kind of came out of the action plan that was like the Winnipeg's queer community, the QPOC circle. So at that time is actually how I came into contact with Elder Barbara Bruce, because she was leading these ceremonies for BIPOC communities and was like one of my first
Yeah.
like my first ceremonies in Winnipeg started off with BIPOC people. So there was like Black people, obviously Indigenous from Africa, and then there was so many different like people from like Middle Eastern nations as well, and as well as like of the Asian diaspora. I think that's one of the
Yes.
things that I loved about Winnipeg, was just like the willingness to sit in circle and just to be like Indigenous in the best way possible, and just having ancestors present. And then that was like obviously like bringing you into that circle and being in part of that. It expanded my universe like forever.
Oh, absolutely. Because I remember feeling so inspired. And when we met, because we had only followed each other on social media, and I just like wanted to know who you are. Like, I just felt like there was this energy between us that felt really cool, even on social media. And then to meet you in person, I was just like gagged. I was actually gagged.
Like history, like finding each other. It was just like a significant moment in the cosmos when you and I linked up.
I know. And we were so lucky because we suited with Charlotte Nolan and Barbara Bruce, and Gail Pruden was in there. And I believe there was another, they have an Indigenous name. It's something like with a P. I can't remember. It's another two-spirit elder. If it doesn't come to me, we can like top this out or whatever. But I remember there was another elder that was in there. They've been having some health issues recently. It wasn't Myra, it was somebody else.
Okay, Canada.
Yes.
Winnie,
yes.
Yeah, Winnie.
Winnie, yes, was in there as well. And I loved it because that was the first time I really sat together openly, not divided, not like you sit here because of your gender and you sit there because of your gender. And I remember that was I remember having that conversation with my mother, being like, this is very important that we host this type of ceremony in this space, because there's like no sweat lodges that right now that are accessible for urban two-spirit people, let alone, BIPOC folks, when we're trying to make kin together, because we do want to share our ceremony together. And I felt like that was such an incredible experience. And we're having this experience, we're singing in there, we're sweating, and then we go out and me and you just start talking about like being a fan, like hard femme topping and wanting to dominate. And I was like, oh my creator, who is this person?
There was some really good back and forth between you and I. And I knew that from that moment. I was like, oh my God, this individual is going to be somebody that I claim as a friend forever. There's no way I want to let go of you.
No, I ain't
unless you want me to.
Yeah, exactly. Consent. But I feel like we got our claws into each other for sure. And it's only it always just feels like there's just so much that whenever we get together, it just the sparks fly and the creativity flows. And I think you don't ever, like, it's hard to want to throw that. I don't want to throw that out. I want to keep that close to my heart, because it's can be very rare when that kind of like happens so naturally.
Yeah. And then like kind of thing that when I think of you personally, it is like you got like my creative juices flowing. And then I don't have that kind of exchange with a lot of people, given that like a lot of my immediate friends are people that are organizers in the political realm of things. And that's kind of the world that I come from. So like, and I don't come from the art world, but I do have like an artistic minded, way of thinking and being. And kind of when I was starting to like explore into like the realm of like kink and as well as like performance art. I know that you're one of the people that I can always go and bounce ideas back off of, and kind of got like the primer going for like whatever it is that I'm about to do. And especially like for me, like I do a lot of the social events and social related I'm manifesting socially in the social realm, I guess. That's where I work in, but kind of want like, having all these ideas about like doing art performances. And I've yet to cross over into that threshold of artistry, because there's just something about being like, raw and intimate with your work, and you presented yourself in that way, and it does put you in a very vulnerable position having your work critiqued. And there's something that I'm wanting to do. And I think that's one of my resolutions for 2022 is to put something forth in the artistic realm, whether that be a book, whether that be a performance artist display. Something needs to come out of this like mangled chaos of being.
Your artistic narrative is very much desired and wanted, and I think about that a lot because you've done so much a lot of frontline visible action out there. As somebody, like, I remember when you changed the root of pride, you're just like, F this. Yeah. I just think about that, of what that means for you as a two-spirit person to be so visible out there.
Yeah,
it's part of our resurgence,
And when you mentioned the parade, I was like, yeah, that was actually that was like my entryway into like organizing scene in Winnipeg, because that was 2018 and I was the Pride Grand Marshal, and that was the time when like the Winnipeg Jats were kind of moving into mainstream like consciousness, and sports fans everywhere taking over the streets, whiteout parties. And I think that was even the year that Grandma Shingoose got manhandled at one of the whiteout parties. And there was like residual anger going into the Pride festivities. And I just remember thinking, like, obviously, like my young self, like, because that was years ago, that was like we're talking 4 years ago, and that even seems like a lifetime ago. But
I know.
My idealistic like young 20s, I'm loving like the newest feminist movement. I'm loving like trans history. I'm thinking Marsha P. Johnson, Sylvia Rivera, and I'm keeping that energy in my mind. And I'm thinking about liberation and what that means as like a queer people, as trans people, as two-spirit people. And then it just felt like I had a lot to represent going into that. And I felt like because we were delegated to go down York Avenue instead of like the normal Main and Portage route, which is like the most like visible route a parade can be on in Winnipeg. And then like the fact that like the city of Winnipeg denied us this route. And I just thought to myself, well, if they're not going to give it to us, then we're gonna take the route. So like I kind of started conspiring, and there was every group. So like, and I kind of at that point had made my way around the community. So I knew contact people. I was like, hey, let's, like Sunshine House drag queens, like majority of them like walked with us, and the people from QPOC, that's when Uzoma was still heading QPOC, like they were that like little rebellion movement. And then so many of the like two-spirit relatives that I met like throughout Manitoba, like because of before moving to Winnipeg, I had a whole little, I want to say career, but I was going to First Nations communities to speak about like, my story as a trans woman, being Cree, being First Nations, being like under Cree patriarchy. So like I was doing that work like previously. So then all the people from those circles that I had met in prior years were also present at that pride event. And then when we reached, I can't remember, we literally had like I had a whole meeting the day before and planned the route. I'm like, this is the route we're gonna break off, and kind of how it happened. It was really cool. It just felt like, hey, like because we're rebelling, and we're rebelling against something, and it just felt like power. And then they had the nerve to come like stick police on us. kind of stop our route. And then there's video of me just kind of maneuvering past the police officers while I had a megaphone in hand chanting "Don't hide pride." And I feel like I just took examples from history and applied it to what was happening in the present. And obviously that led to chains of event, because the year after they had two-spirit people in the front of the parade the following year. And I was like, you know what, I can't help but feel a little bit responsible. And it's a small victory, and we need to celebrate our small victories. So I'm glad that I could use my pride platform for that, because the pride entity itself is known for being so heavily whitewashed and corporate focused now.
Yep.
It seems to be the new machine. It's kind of it was kind of just it was personal at that point.
Yes. And it's leave it once again to trans femmes, leading the way, putting their necks out on the line when things are, to check our communities, because that's how it's been. And you really followed in those footsteps of being enough is enough, to remind people about that, because there was a stark difference between the whiteout parties, the kind of weird supremacy that came with that, the white, everything was white and all that. And what does that mean for people living downtown, our homeless population, the population that is often downtown, all of that, a lot of our Indigenous relatives are down there, that's their spots. And that kind of interruption, I think really, you could feel it after, because I remember a lot of the pushback that folks had of how it was so visible before, and then you see that pushback of, okay, just take an alternative route, you have your rights now, so you could get married, as if we give a fuck about that.
Yeah, I mean, that was the other thing too, as as an Indigenous person, as a Cree woman, I felt like I have some title. And I don't know, I felt it was I have to do this. I have the power. I'm a First Nation woman, I'm supposed to be sovereign. And I wasn't using that language at the time, sovereignty, self-determination. I was just coming into those understanding. And the following year, I would get sucked into the world of learning about land back, learning about Indigenous resistance. And it was a weird transition for me, because 2018 felt like the start of the two-spirit resurgence movement that happened. And it happened in the art realm, it happened in the activist realm, it happened in education, and it just seemed like everywhere you looked there was two-spirit people emerging. And for me, living in northern Manitoba for most of my younger years, I had started co-founded Pride North of 55. So I did start my advocacy with the Pride movements. So there was that. And I remember I need to know more. And then I started learning about queer militancy, and then about the Occupy movement. And, these were just things that I was really, really interested in. Of course, the rise of the Black Power movement. So learning about Malcolm X, Assata Shakur, and, taking all of those lessons, and then I'm applying them to my praxis, and learning what praxis and theory is. And
I know.
it was so weird, because I came to Winnipeg for my own personal reasons, and none of them were become an advocate. It was kind of something that just kind of came onto my path, and I kind of went with it. Kind of was just you know what, I'm gonna give the universe control, and this is kind of where I ended up. And now I got to hold space for my relatives and speak out on social justice issues, as well as our socioeconomic issues impacting Northern Indigenous communities. It's kind of become a sudden realization of that I'm carrying a lot of responsibility. And, representing any community can be nerve-wracking for one individual, because it's the way that it's set up. We're not supposed to just be one person representing a variety of issues that are experienced by so many different tribes and nations and people of diasporas. We all are impacted by colonialism in some way or another. But really, when I think about it, think about like the times where I stepped up and other people stepped up as well. And there's like kind of always like a multi-tribal approach in Winnipeg, because we don't have a clear
Yes.
understanding of whose land it is. We don't. We have the very extra long land acknowledgement that goes like, you are on the homeland of the Ojibwe, Cree, OG Cree, Métis, Dakota, Lakota, and then now we acknowledge that we have an Inuit population here
Yes.
in Winnipeg. But like,
Yep.
you know, so we have all this cultural knowledge. So we have just such an interesting way about going about things here in our city. And there's such a huge pride behind being an Indigenous person. And I didn't fully have that until I moved here. There's something about Winnipeg that just makes you
Yes.
proud to be Indigenous.
Absolutely. It's like the biggest urban, it's like one of the biggest urban reses, you know, for sure. It's called, you know, in that there's a legitimate res like in the middle of Winnipeg that people don't even know that there's like registered like, you know, tribal land or
That's
whatever.
Pagwis,
Yeah.
right?
I think so. Yeah, it is Peguis, isn't it?
And
They have
Long
their
Plains.
Yeah. And it's just like, you know, there's that, but then it's also all Indigenous land. Like it's so
Mhm.
interesting how there was this dichotomy. I felt it at one point where it's like the cities are like this forsaken land that we just have to forget about because all the settlers are here. And I'm like, oh, bitch, this is our land too. Especially when you come from now being in unceded territory in so-called Montreal, Jojage, or Munyang, as the Anishinaabe like to call it. You know, this was never given up. There was no treaty signed here. There was no negotiations, you know, with the Warrior Society. Probably for good reason, because it's a warrior society. They're not giving anything up. So you think about that stolen land, and that it's still our land. This is all Indian land, you know. Even urban spaces, even though they've undergone such a change from what our ancestors might know them to be, this is still very much a place that we claim that is our home.
That's true. And I've had such I've had a wonderful time learning from urban natives and learning about like being decolonial in spaces that were meant to totally wipe us out. And you know, like the urban natives thrive here in Winnipeg. Everybody here is deadly.
They're so deadly. Every time I come home to Winnipeg, there's just so many deadly folks to meet up, and they're always doing such amazing things in the community, especially like the Two-Spirit community. But something that we experienced, both you and I just recently, was a drum circle or drumming. Yeah. So I kind of want to segue into that experience because I wanted to see, you know, it's been really sitting in me, just vibrating since that all happened, where through an art show, we were able to get access to drumming and to teaching, specifically with Megan and Chrissy Cielen. And I just wanted to talk to you about how that was for you, because I wanted to get into how that was for you. I have so much to say, but I'm like, I want to hear from you, but I still want to talk about it.
I love that. And first of all, thank you for organizing it and allowing us to be in that space, because the space that we created was something that just transcended time and energy. And it was like but it was like being back home with earth and that drum, the sound of those drums. And, you know, obviously Christine, our sisters, like beautiful singers, beautiful singers.
And just like, I love the generosity, that one of them was more powwow style, another was more traditional. And that that this event was very specific, that it was closed, that it was kind of invite only, not to exclude, but to give us that space where we had people, you know, there was a lot of invites within community, but obviously we have to be aware that there's a panini epidemic of paralysis happening, that stops us from getting together. But it was like the medicine. I felt like everybody in that circle really needed that medicine in that moment.
And it was medicine. It was so healing. And to me, like, I had all these like questions about the powwow realm. So I'm a traditional women's dancer, and I contribute to our local Two-Spirit powwow as well as like a helper, and I've helped with the pageants. And as you know, like our planning has been halted by the the panini, the pandemic.
Yeah.
And then
Pandemia.
and then it's even slowed me down because like I just getting out of like being COVID positive. This is my 10th day of
Yeah.
isolation. So tomorrow I got to actually do stuff again because I've just been sequestered in my apartment in central Winnipeg after contracting it after a holiday family gathering. It's as simple as
Yep.
spending time with family. Like,
Yep.
and it's really starting to become hard to control. And the best like outcome we can do is like being
Yep.
at home and trying to minimize contact, but with
Yep.
things like holiday gatherings, which I'm not condoning, like breaking these like
Nope.
safety protocols, because definitely I'm suffering for the consequences, and I think I would be
Mm-hmm.
suffering more had I not been vaccinated, because it was
Oh,
around. I'm
absolutely.
actually very congested and still very much feeling like I'm still sick. Like I can still hear it, but no longer.
Mm-hmm.
I'm no longer in the sick phase, but
That's
it's
good.
lingering, and it's kind of sad because I have all these ideas and plans to organize things. I do stuff
Yes.
for youth and women mostly right now. So like I'm piggybacking off of my sisters Raven and Vanna. They run a lodge and
Yeah.
been doing really awesome stuff. So they've included me full time in their teaching lodges. So I'm doing the Two Spirit teachings as well as like doing a few women's teachings, and finding it like really really humbling, as well as being able to actually be mentored and actually doing ceremony,
Yeah.
actually praying for those objects, actually blessing, actually singing the songs and putting it into practice, because in the long term it allows me to prepare for like an actual teacher role. And there will be a
Yeah.
time where I do run my own lodges, and actually
Yep.
one of the first times I was actually able to we did a sweat lodge, just women only. And
Mm.
there's like this introspective there with my sisters. Having me there eliminates like the need to have a male firekeeper, and like therefore like adds to the safety with so much trauma happening within our
Yep.
community. Like having men present at Two Spirit events can be very traumatic for us. Having men in Two Spirit, like not only that, but like women's circles as well. And there's
Yep.
no way to ensure like safety. So like I'm really glad that my sisters have thought about it in that way. Even though that I don't announce myself as a firekeeper, but because I'm
Right.
Rocky Cree, Northern Manitoba, we don't have the same type of like protocols around fire, just because we live in a northern climate. It's like get the fire going or you'll freeze to death. Like it's kind of that
Yeah.
scenario.
Get the fire going or you'll die. Essentially.
Yeah, like we're not
don't care
waiting
about
for
what.
men to like
Yeah.
light our home fires. And in the Rocky culture, it's the women who keep the fires. So I'm like, well, that's
Mm.
me. I'm a Rocky Cree woman. I'm gonna do this. And
Listen.
I'm predominantly like teaching like Anishinaabe youth most of the time, but I'm like, you know what? We're relatives. You can learn a little bit of Northern Cree style.
Absolutely. That's so important for them too, because it's like so much of us that's what we do is we exchange, our perspectives. We can only tell you what we know from like our perspectives, right?
Oh my goodness. You know what? That makes me feel so sad about the fact that we're not being able to connect with our southern relatives right now, like people
Yeah.
like south of the border.
Yep.
And there would always be like these communities, we'd have all these Lakota, Dakota.
Yeah.
I know, like I feel bad because there's like the two tribes that I remember down south besides Cherokee. And I'm like, that's this, and then you know what? It's so weird because my favorite people are from the south of the border, and
Aww.
they have made significant impacts in the indigenous resistance movement, like
Oh,
thinking about
yes.
like all the prairie resistance, and a lot of the native peoples who've left like philosophical mark on our contemporary people, like a lot
Yep.
of leaders who've gone to war for the land, like Wounded Knee,
Yep.
thinking about the Alcatraz occupation, and all those things have like had a significant like impact on the way that I organize, because we don't talk about those things in our school systems here. We don't
Nope.
talk about those as families. We don't talk about those as like even a community. And there's just this like bright, like bold resistance movement that has happened here in the prairies. Apparently we're not prairie enough for those southern prairie people too.
Goodness.
Like we are a prairie city. Even within Canada, I feel that with like Alberta and Saskatchewan, it's like y'all not consider Manitoba the prairies, because we are, at least the southern portion where we live, are prairies, and we live a prairie lifestyle. And but also like there's just like this amazing like mixture of people in Winnipeg, because you have like a lot of Northern Cree relatives and Dene people that come here. And then you have like your Anishinaabes from like the Kenora, Couchiching variation. And, you know, obviously a lot of Dakota land. And I would argue that this was originally Dakota land. It makes sense, but
controversial. Get the piping tea
it is
going.
a controversial take, but like it's like a huge thing here within the city of Winnipeg, like whose land this actually is. And then like, well, I'm not gonna speak for the entire Cree population, but I just know that we're northern based. We didn't originate here. And I can't help but notice from my time that I've sat in Midday ceremonies that the Anishinaabe moved from the east. So
listen,
you know, knowing those things, I'm like, yeah.
The great split. We ain't from here, honey. DeSoto, we ran freaking west, northwest, as far as we could, apparently. You know, so
yeah,
like it all comes back to certain places, but it's like we're talking like long ass times that like, you know, that wasn't just like in 100 years. That's like hundreds and thousands of years of these migrations. Yeah. And then where do we land and how do we share? Because it's, you know, I even think about Winnipeg itself being a flood bed where we gathered, that nobody actually really, from my understanding, that folks didn't really like live there, but came to visit there, came to come together.
It's like a trading port there.
Because of our connections to the rivers and waters, and how that, you know, that was a huge part of this exhibition, was thinking about those connections. You know, when I look at the exhibition and think about even myself, a Sinayak, who's Inuk, and Kite, who's Ugala Lakota, even those are different nations coming together and thinking about what that means for us to gather in this space and share with our relatives here in, you know, in so-called Winnipeg, you know, and just all those medicine that come from it, you know, and even, you know, when you're talking about yourself, like your gift, I saw a really great example of your gift in was just your confidence in that space to share that Northern Light song. And just, you know, you just took to it and like, okay, I'm leading this, you know, and how when we just are given the chance just to activate that, you know, that was beautiful.
Thank you. I actually love singing that song. It's one of the few songs that I know that are actually Rocky Cree from my people and within my own Cree dialect. So I was actually able to teach it too.
Yeah.
Which is something that I have a hard time doing with drum songs, because I'm not a drum instructor, but I hold that song true and close to my heart. And you know, I kind of laugh because every time the Northern Lights pop up on Facebook, there's like thousands of Cree people that come out of the woodwork to share teachings about how you shouldn't share them. And I'm like, you know what? Like, I'm a traditional person. I will be screenshotting most of these and like collectivizing for later.
Yeah.
But like the Northern Light song, it's one of those things where I'm like, it's beautiful. It is about Northern Light. It is about bringing in relatives and as they dance in, you know. And then for me, it's like I get to be actually authentically part of my culture, because when I started to hand drum, it was like because of my friends here in Winnipeg, like my friends Kathy K, Thunderstuck Sky, and Ronald Gamlin. Like, they would regularly host like drumming circles, and so I started learning all the Anishinaabe songs and going to the rallies and singing those songs, even though they're not in my dialect. And I eventually wanted to learn something that was from my dialect and was from my tribe. So that was like the first song that I learned, and it's something that I love sharing with people. And I think it's really beautiful when we get to exchange in that way. And I never even thought about that, because when I sing that song, I'm just transported back to home and back to Kiwetinoong, where I'm from, and how that's like such a customary song. When we sing it, we come together and we sing that song when we want to invite the ancestors in to join us. So, and I even shared that song has like, you know, different stages of inviting different members of our community and from the spirit world. So I really get to, I'm really like getting somewhere along my spiritual path and understanding. And that song brought me one step closer. And that drum session that we had brought me closer too. It's just, it was so insightful to be able to ask about like the different, like the powwow worlds, like going to different drum circles. And, you know, the aunties, like the Sawan auntie shared about like, you know, being on the medicine trail with the drum and just how different it is. And, you know, from my upbringing in Nisitawayasik, that's where I grew up, Nisitawayasik. My sister and my older sister, my younger sister were involved in the culture, whereas I wasn't. I was never a part of the culture. It really sucked. But my sisters were dancers and they drummed. They did the drum groups, but I didn't get to do it because queer phobia is so rampant within Cree country. And when I was younger, I just had to take the ceremonial knowledge that was available to me as a gender fluid kid.
Yeah.
Because I was repressing so much femininity that even when I tried to front as masculine, I used to wear the ball caps. I used to buy the big blinged out t-shirts with the giant Tupac and the Biggie and all that. And even then I was still denied Cree teachings and access to Cree knowledge because of my femininity. So it felt like my femininity was something that I had to, you know, repress and be ashamed about. And like there was times where women knew. So like there was times where women would bring me into the full moon lodges and I would sit with the women. And I even as a kid, I would make a fuss about sitting with the men. And at that time, I thought it was a safety issue more so than about like my own gender. And like to a kid, safety is like, it looks like many things. It looks like many things. For me, it meant that nobody was going to tease me about the way I look, the way I talk, the way that I express with my hands. It meant that, you know, it just meant that I was allowed to be there and to absorb. But, you know, having that as a barrier for so many years prevented me from participating within the culture. So I had to watch my sisters like dance with the powwows. And I always envisioned myself doing grand entry in like a woman's traditional dress. And I never got to do that. And I wanted to specifically do it back home. But like when we did the two-spirit powwow is when it opened up, like that was when that path of possibility opened up for me. And that's why I continue to advocate and ride for those spaces so hard, because they are so important to members of our community.
Yes.
And so it just felt for me like, why was I held back from the culture for such a long time, even though I had proximity to it? It's just that I didn't understand it for such a long time. And having our like aunties share about that world and what that drum is and how people act around that drum, I'm like, those are all things that I'm gonna remember
forever.
All the stories. You know, even like talking about like how some people still get high, or they'll go for a drink even while on the powwow trail because they don't see it the same way. And there is competition powwow where it's a totally different mindset from the way that we operate as traditional folk.
Absolutely. All of those interconnections, you know, and being able to speak about harm reduction, I think was really important, because so many of us do struggle. Not struggle, I don't even want to say, but it's like, it's not necessarily a struggle. The struggle is how do we talk about it openly without the stigma of someone that uses drug and alcohol, and for me, what was so important about that whole experience was being able to speak about it, to be like, this is something that we've experienced. How do you guys feel about that? You know, because they did share a lot about the one thing that I really resonated with was what they told us about the path that they've taken for over a decade, and all of the ebb and flow, and how hard it is to really walk in that truth, and that it would really resonated. I felt like for me, and I feel like for a lot of folks there, what that we understand what that is, when this world has not been shaped for us to exist in it in a way that we can access our culture freely, or to be a part of that, where we feel shameful to be on a drum and to wear certain things when we do it and all that. It really just came down to this is your drum and you take care of it like a child. Like to understand those teachings, I think was like something that it was like, you know what, F all that other stuff, because like fuck that, because that's all that extra noise out there of somebody want to bring us down because there is something that's happening for them inside of themselves. They're projecting that stuff on us because we are living freely and are living our truth. And when we do that, it's just the shit out of them because they're like, damn, that looks so fun.
I mean, I love scaring the shit out of straight people and people who don't follow like a more radical path. It seems like inevitably like they're I don't know what it is, but then my Kingster brain turns on and I'm like, these people are scared of their own power. They're scared of making their own decisions for themselves and to think for themselves, which is like a real thing, which is why like I embrace being of a critical nature, because for one, it allows me to look at things objectively, not just from experience, but like also like from an objective standpoint. I'm able to look at things like harm reduction, access to ceremony, as well as like, you know, lived experience of like my trans kin. A lot of my trans siblings, particularly like trans women, are sex workers.
Yep.
And you know, and when you're a sex worker, you're in a world that is like filled with violence, there's drugs, but like there's also autonomy within that world for them.
Yep.
And like, and maybe they don't have the words, maybe they don't have all of the nuances to be able to explain that to people who don't live in that world, but like the same time, like they still deserve to be here. And I feel like that's why we need to be where we are, you know, leading drum circles, leading lodges, so that our people can come back in, so they can still be who they are and pray and have connection to creator and ancestors without having to think about like, you know, what I'm doing in the material world is separating me from spirit. No, it's not. I mean, I can debate so many people over like drug and substance use and like the impacts of it, but like the biggest impacts is like the stigma we throw onto it and the like degrees of separation from those who are living with those substance and alcohol issues, and where the rest of us are. And I'm like, you know, I'm somewhere in the middle too, because I'm grieving and I'm going through a lot too, and I need harm reduction for myself as well, and I know other people need harm reduction. And I feel like there was like a phase maybe in 2019 where every nonprofit was using those language about like, you know, let's talk harm reduction, but they wouldn't go into like, you know, like what does that mean for people who are actually in a position of needing it? What does harm reduction mean in their worlds? What does that look like? Does that mean access to clean needles? Does that mean needle exchange programs? Is that meaning that we're going to make a more conscious efforts to like do the outreach and actually connect with those relatives who don't have the access of institutions as well? And you know, the nonprofit world tends to be like over glorified for these scenarios, but realistically, like we don't need institutions to provide this to us. We need to provide this to each other, and we need to already have the access without the barriers. And you know, the barriers are the problem itself too. Like where do we start to kind of identify these barriers and how to remove them, so that when we actually are talking harm reduction, we are actually talking about the philosophy that saves lives and allows people to still have like a sense of normalcy and have access to things that they're currently being denied, like housing, like having financial independence, as well as like, you know, like there's so much more that goes into that, like being an anti-capitalist, you know, like why do we have to pay for food and water in the first place? And then it goes back to being indigenous too. Like those are my rights, those are my inherent rights to have access to food, water, and shelter, and even having rights to ceremony, access to ceremony. But we're only starting to like come into these things in discussions, but like now we're seeing so many different people take action, like a lot of camps. And like one of my favorite initiatives that did come out of the last few years was the camp that was set up in Alberta, Camp Bikiwiwin, I think is the name. And I just thought, what a really awesome model for harm reduction and access. And it was like traditional, it was contemporary. And I think that's where I want to be, is in the middle of traditional and contemporary. Like, how do we like how do we implement like modern tradition? You know, how do we apply traditions that were once used to, sorry, I keep hitting my mic.
That's your hands. The physical
spirit.
wants to come into the you know, the physicality is there.
That's how you conjure. I used to say this about like two-spirit people. I was like, you know, I feel like they're spell casting when they're when we're expressing with our hands, but like that's also like a storyteller thing that we do as well. So I digress. Well, I think like when it comes to like the harm reduction, we need to look at it more within our lodges too, because even within two-spirit circles, a lot of our two-spirit elders forgot that they were there at the place that most of us younger people are at now, with addictions, with relationships, with whether that's like interpersonal relationships, familial, and even intimate relationships. And then there's like, you know, the financial thing. Most of us that within our circle are fundamentally anti-capitalist, but we still need to survive.
Yep.
Like it is still the system that thrives. And how do we thrive under it? And like that's kind of like where our mutual aid efforts, where our kinship kind of comes in, because, and I know you're so big on kinship, and so am I. And I really, really hope we can kind of like segue into kinship a little bit, because I feel like that is like a radical act of like, a kinship is just a radical act. It is.
It really is.
It is
just
like,
being together, you know. Well, actually, we're like at 40 minutes already.
Oh my god!
I just need a whole episode where we just like talk shit. It's just me and Brielle. But ultimately, I feel like, yeah, maybe there was just like so much mic drop. I was like, okay, we gotta wrap it up. But then I was like, oh, every time you open your goddamn mouth, it's just like Deb way win, tap way win. It's just coming out. So people, you got to go out there and say that you want me and Brielle to talk more about kinship, and you got to pay us to do it. You know, we ain't gonna give the whole gab for free.
No, this is just the teaser.
This is a tease.
This is hardly the foreplay.
Yeah, we just getting warmed up. Okay, we just getting warmed up.
And I'm lukewarm.
When Veins Meet Like Rivers is hosted and recorded by Cielen, Dayna Danger, and Kite. Additional guests on this episode include Madeline Mcleod, Brielle Beardy-Linklater, Ashley Houston, and Debbie Cielen. Our intro and outro song is an original score produced by Kite. Podcast art by Cielen. This podcast is presented by Plug In Institute of Contemporary Art. You can find a link to the Plug In website in our show notes. We are produced by Collective Broadcast Co., an artist-run collective specializing in tech and live stream solutions. You can find the link to their website in our show notes. Special thanks to my great-grandmother, Madeline Mcleod, our family name, Campbell Klein, Good Talking Turtle, Mino Gagi Kido Bikanak, my mother, for sharing her Good Life song, Adaya Knight for holding me and my voice down during this whole process, and my kinstallations. Apachiko Gijawinaman. This episode is supported by Plug In ICA's generous donors, including the Directors Circle, Canada Council for the Arts, the Manitoba Arts Council, the Winnipeg Arts Council, and MB 150. It's a great day to be Indigenous. Bama peace.